This is that Morgan PR12 with the 450 volt capacitors with more than 450 volts present. That's really not a good idea. See the previous video on this for the complete rundown of that. Link up top right now. And while I've got everyone's attention, hopefully, there's been a lot of reactions to that Blues Junior Left On Overnight video that are kind of bizarre to me, as if people read the title of the video, didn't watch the video, and felt the need to comment. Of course, most amps should be fine left on overnight. The entire point of that video is not that, oh my God, someone left an amp on overnight. It's that that was what the client reported as the cause and effect. And I went through and I found that that might have exacerbated an existing oscillation. But it wasn't because it was left on overnight. It's because the amp was unstable and instabilities grow as an amp is left on, and it got worse and worse. So please, if you're going to argue or try to say, ha, 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 listen to the whole video, or watch, or don't, or sit on your hands. I know that's not a very popular thing to do these days. Anyway, we're going to take these filter caps out, and I'm going to lift this board up because we have all these wire junctions here, and the solder joints are terrible, and I need to make sure that in the process of redoing this, that I don't loosen any of those wire connections. You know, if you look at these tube sockets, you'd think the lead dress in this amp is just great. But if I lift up the board, which is only held in place by 2 screws, by the way, all that pretty neat lead dress that you saw here when the board's in place just turns into spaghetti, just random spaghetti. Now, there are 3 things you want to do when designing and building an amp. You want to have the wires as short as possible while still allowing service. And you want to steer wires away from each other. We get some bolognese sauce on here and I'll have lunch. So when it's in place, it looks great. Beneath there, total shit show. Okay, old caps out, old solder removed. It is a very thick board, thick fiberglass board. That's good. It's double-sided, double-sided through-hole plated PCB, which is good. The issue that they're running into on the really bad factory solder joints is that the board is so thick that it's really hard to get solder to flow through and fill the whole thing. It keeps wanting to go down to the bottom and blob up in big blobs on the bottom because it's just so much solder to fill that. And as a result, it gets air bubbles, and those air bubbles come to the top before the solder is set up, and you get those really nasty looking joints you saw in the first video. I've reflowed all the solder joints, and I'm going to redo these from scratch and show you a trick. The 4 new caps are in place. There's a dab of silicone beneath each one. That'll set up in the next 20 minutes. And before I solder, these already are held in place by these mechanical crimps, which make little hooks over the holes at each end. The original caps were only held in place by the solder. This gives a little bit of mechanical support, much less likely to have issues. So let's solder this, but we're going to do it in phases because it's such a lot, and we don't need to fill the whole thing up. The important thing is that this metal has contact with the other metal. So the metal of the cap lead has contact with the eyelet metal, through-hole metal rather. Let's see if you can see this. I've got the board semi-upside down for this, so I'm flowing solder into these joints from the bottom up. So any excess fills this. Now I'll just try to make it look pretty from this side, even though I know it's already secure. I only have a short window before it'll flow all down in that hole and get air bubbles and gobs on the other side. This is almost purely cosmetic. The mechanical support's done on the bottom of the board, and the solder on the bottom is solid. The cosmetics matter, as long as it's not cheating cosmetics like those stupid preamp wires in this amp. Pastafarian festival that's happening beneath the board is just a shame and a sin. There's a little bit of cloudiness there, or there was some stuff on the board that did not like getting hot. This board is covered in a fluxy yuckiness. All right, so 4 new 500 volt caps. All right, we'll put it back together with this screw and a screw at the other end because that's all it gets. Not the most stable of designs. I guess it's nicely cushioned by all that excess preamp wiring. All right, put the tubes in, hook up the reverb tank, and see if the Banshee has left. All right, we're going to power this on. The amp is in play, not standby. The standby switch does nothing good in this amp, can only damage rectifier tube. Though they did put some diodes on the rectifier, which helps. It's not as good as implementing standby correctly. So we're just not going to use it. I'll power the amp on. We've got 120 volts in the walls right now. It was 122 a minute ago. But coming out right now, it's fluctuating between 120 and 121. We're going to measure the B plus at the first filter cap. 459 volts. It's going down a little bit, 457 something. Remember, this amp had 450 volt caps in here. And here we are, loaded. It's at 457, almost 458. That's why we don't use 450 volt caps. Okay, let's see how the sound is now that we can trust these 4 filter caps and their associated solder joints. That's with volume and tone at noon. That sounds pretty dark to me. I suspect they used an audio taper pot for that treble. It doesn't sound good until you get to almost 2 o'clock. And not good, but that's not the right way to put it. Some guys are going to love that darker sound. It doesn't sound balanced like a midway point until you get to almost 2 o'clock. So that's where it is right now. Put up just a hair. Add in the reverb. I turn the reverb up a bit more. Now we tap on the board, which is how we found that awful problem last time. Yeah, that's all fixed. And all right, this amp is now safe for the owner to sell. So he can sell it with a good conscience. Whoever buys it is getting a much, much better amp than the label on it deserves. Not a very good sounding amplifier, in my opinion. But, you know, it is now an amplifier which is not going to catch on fire, electrocute someone, or squeal like a Ned Beatty.